Hello, my dear students, and welcome back to our fun reads. As you can notice, I'm in a little bit of a different area. I'm going to try to read outside today. So you may hear sounds of the wind kind of gushing by or the birds singing in the background. Hopefully it won't be too distracting. And with that being said, let's begin our read. Today we're going to be reading chapter 8, 9, 10, and 11. So chapter 8, Teddy Bears and Toothbrushes. The kids had a chance to forget about their troubles for a while. After lunch, they tagged along to Mimi to the haberdashery department and critiqued her on her choices. Haberdashery is like the big fancy hats. Too big, too small, too frou-frou, too bloody awful. That was Papa's comment about this pink and purple hat. Exasperated, Mimi finally shooed them all away, and they headed for the incredible toy department. The boys rushed off to the train displays, the girls beelined for the dolls. Gee, said Christina, what a great place. You can get everything you want for Christmas right here. She thought that she had never seen so much of everything toy in one place. It was so overwhelming, in fact, that she could only think to buy one thing. I think I will get a teddy bear for my cousin Avery, she said. Avery would be almost 3 at Christmas, and Christina felt that she would love a big, fat-bellied bear to sleep with in the new room she was going to move into before her new baby brother or sister was born. Christina stepped into the queue for the cash register. A swarthy man in baggy pants and shaggy hair rushed up to her. He looked just as out of place among the Barbie dolls and girl toys as the Easter Bunny in a Santa suit. Christina gasped. The man stuck his face right to hers and shook his finger. "You have been warned," he hissed. Christina cringed and Maggie screamed. Then Christina did something she had never expected to do. She hollered at the top of her lungs, "Fire!" Chapter 9. So that was a short chapter, but very interesting. Chapter 9, Scotland Yard. That night, back at the Ritz, the adults and the kids were meeting around a large, dark oak table, like something out of King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table. The adults sat in big, high-backed chairs. So did the kids, only they looked and felt very small and afraid, especially since only one person was standing, a very serious man from Scotland Yard. The London Police Department looked down at them as if they were very squishable bugs. He said. Let me go over this thing one more time. He tapped his pencil on his notepad. Grant groaned under his breath. They had been over this thing over 40 times, it seemed. Mimi gave Grant the look. That meant behave yourself or else. The detective continued. You saw something at Big Ben. You found a note at the museum. You shot a shaggy-haired man yell at you in the store, and you scream, "Fire!" Right? Christina felt like she could bawl. Yes, she admitted for the umpteenth time. Papa always said when you get in danger, you should yell fire instead of help. That people would pay more attention to. People had paid attention, all right. When Christina had cried out, the man had dashed away. Fire alarms started screeching so loudly that you could not even think. Harrod had been evacuated, and it was only because no smoke was detected that the sprinkler system had not gone on that would have turned the toy department into a lake. The worst thing was that the man had escaped and Christina had lost the note in the shuffle. So the kids had no evidence to prove their claim. The police had been to Big Ben and found no sign of the sketch on the side of the clock tower. Mimi came to the kids' defense. I have never known these children to tell a lie, she asserted. While you may have no proof to what they say, you certainly have no proof that they are making things up. Papa agreed. I can assure you that I will keep a tight rein on these children, but I suggest you focus your job and let us focus on ours. Mr. Bryan was there too. He seemed quite embarrassed about the situation. What if the newspapers picked up this on the news? Surely it would be embarrassing for his publishing company and perhaps reflect negatively on Mimi and her forthcoming book. The detective cleared his throat. He had seemed to come to a decision. We will continue to investigate, he said. And you, he said, pointing to the children, continue to be good little tourists and school students. Leave the mystery solving to me. And me, Mimi said under her breath. Christina couldn't help herself and giggled. The detective glared at her. We don't take that word bombing lightly in London these days, he said to Christina. I suggest you not use that word again. The kids could tell it was not a suggestion. It was an order. The man from Scotland Yard left, and everyone relaxed. I think he thinks he's Sherlock Holmes, said George, referring to the famous fictional London detective. From Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, crime novel. I think he thinks we're Jack the Ripper, said Maggie. She meant the really bad meanie who killed people in London in a very nasty way a long time ago. Papa stood up. Oh, hello, Ruby. Papa stood up. I think he means business, and so do I. You know what happens to kids who do not obey their parents and grandparents. What? Grant said in a tiny voice. Papa winked at Mr. Bryan and bellowed, We send them to the Tower of London. What's that? Grant asked. Tomorrow's Saturday, said Maggie. We'll show you. As the kids got up and headed out to the room, behind the men, Christina noticed Mimi sitting silently at the table. She could tell her grandmother's little gray mystery brain cells were working overtime. What she could not tell was that Mimi was truly worried. She really did know her imaginative grandchildren knew fact from fiction and had the same instinct for mystery as she did. If they had seen or felt or heard something amiss, well, it probably was. She would have to keep a good eye on them, and knowing Grant and Christina, she knew that they would not like that at all. Chapter 10. The infamous Tower of London. The next morning was bright and sunny. Everyone was in a much better mood. The newspapers had run only a small story about the false alarm at the store from the previous day. There was no mention of a shaggy-haired man, or the kids, or anything. Christina felt sure that the man from Scotland Yard had something to do with that. After a full English breakfast of bacon, eggs, tomatoes, sausage, fried bread, the kids met at the Tower Bridge. Fortunately, the kids were pretty much left to enjoy themselves, while Mr. Bryan followed behind at a discreet distance. He was their chaperone, or babysitter, for the day, while Mimi and Papa worked on the book and were getting ready to visit the Queen. So this is London Bridge, asked Grant. He put his hands on his hips and bent backwards to stare up the two twin towers of the tall bridge that spanned over the Thames River. No, Maggie corrected him. London Bridge is in Arizona. Huh? Said Christina. Arizona as in America? We know where Arizona is, Maggie said smugly. A few years ago, someone in America brought our London Bridge and took it down and moved it to Arizona. This is a Tower Bridge. Hey, said Grant. Whatever bridge it is, it has a drawbridge. The kids watched as the center of the large bridge split in two, each section raising up into the sky to allow the large ship to pass. When it finally closed back, the kids scampered across the bridge, Mr. Bryan following, working a crossword puzzle as he walked. So this is the Tower of London, Christina asked as they approached the tall, white towers on either side of the river. What happened here? George just snickered ominously. What didn't happen here is what you should ask. Christina had learned by now that when the English said tower, or cathedral, or park, or palace, that they really didn't mean one single place, but an entire complex of things. The Tower of London was no exception. There seemed to be a multitude of towers enclosed in a small space, or enclosed in spaces. And as soon as she soon learned plenty of underground dungeons. Grant spotted a man wearing a black outfit with a red embroidery on it and a tall black hat. Is he Scotland Yard? He asked suspiciously. No, said George. He's a beefeater. Well, so am I, said Grant. I can eat hamburgers all the time. No, Grant, said Maggie. A beefeater is one of the 42 yeomen who guard the tower. Well, why didn't you just say so, said Grant indigently. I did, spouted George. Christina laughed. I can see we speak the same English, only not really. Oop, there's the wind. Forget about it, Grant, and ask why the Tower of London is supposed to be so spooky. I don't see anything that bothers me. Maggie and George exchanged looks and snickers. Not like Snickers like the candy, but like like Snickers like the small little laughter. At first the tower seemed rather innocent to Christina. They went inside, waited along with the other tourists, and passed the crown jewels. These were an incredibly display of crowns, scepters, orbs, swords, and other paraphernalia related to the coronation of England's many kings and queens. I think that's a pretty big diamond, Christina said, marveling at the enormous glittering jewel in one crown. Oh, yeah, said Maggie. Like more than 500 carats. That diamond's not made of carats, argued Grant. It's not even orange. Maggie laughed, but Christina put her arm around Grant to comfort him. That's how they measure the size of a diamond, she told her brother. It's carats, not carrots. C-A-R-A-T-S, not C-A-R-R-O-T-S. And you only learn by asking, she said, mainly to Maggie. That's true, Maggie agreed. I guess if I came to America, there would be a lot of things I wouldn't know. Christina nodded at her agreeably. Grant and George had scampered off to see the historic display of weapons, such as swords and guns. But all the kids drew quiet when they came to a display of armor. Christina had forgot that nice and shining armor were not just stuff from fairy tales. The shiny, silver scales that made the suit of armor made her think of armadillos. Armadillos! We learned about those earlier this year. They saw, stiff on the side of the road back home. Oh no. How did they go to the bathroom? Was what Grant wanted to know. But neither Maggie nor George had an answer for that. Well, apparently geese to the noises in the background. Neither Grant nor Christina could believe the next part of the tower tour. They both cringed at the stories the tour guide told of torture in the tower. They were appalled at the rack where prisoners were stretched until their bones broke, in effort to make them confess to deeds, whether they had or had not done them. The scavenger's daughter was another dark age device that squashed the body of the prisoner until they confessed. So basically, they're at this weird museum thing, and they're talking about medieval times. Maggie told them how many people had been beheaded on the guillotine, having their heads chopped off by a falling blade. And then there was a story about 2 boy princes thrown into a dungeon, never to be seen again. So someone else could become in power. You have a really bloody history, Christina criticized. Well, so does America, Maggie retorted. We learned about that too this year. Christina was silent. She thought bad things were bad things, no matter which country or what period of time. I get the picture, Christina said. Now, can't we go see something more cheerful? Somehow, during the tour, they had lost Mr. Bryan. Christina thought she would have been glad to see his face, and to have a nice grandfather lead them back to someplace sunshiny, and someplace warm and pleasant, with ice cream for sale. Maggie nodded and turned and began to lead the children back upstairs. But when they arrived at the entrance leading outdoors, Christina turned to find that Grant had vanished. Chapter 11. Maloo, my darling. That's literally the name of the chapter, by the way. Christina was relieved and surprised to find Grant sitting on a bench with Mr. Bryan. Grant was helping him answer the questions to the crossword puzzle Mr. Bryan was working on. Did you enjoy the tour? Mr. Bryan asked. He stretched and stood up. Would you like to get some ice cream? The kids cheered. Mr. Bryan led the way, and Grant bowed and let the girls go first. How chivalrous, Maggie complimented Grant. Well, I was cold, Grant said, misunderstanding. He thought that she had said, oh, you're shivering. But she said the word chivalrous, meaning very proud, very knightly, very well-mannered. But it's warmer outside than the dark dungeon. She means you're polite, said Christina. Maybe I should stop explaining the vocabulary because it seems like this girl's got it covered. Looking back over her shoulder, like knights of yore. But now Grant really had vanished. Why couldn't her little brother ever keep up, she wondered. She figured he had run ahead or had taken a shortcut to be first in line for ice cream. But when the girls caught up to Mr. Bryan, Grant was nowhere to be seen. Where's your brother? George asked Christina. Christina was not worried, and she didn't want Grant to get in trouble, so she said, oh, I bet he's in the restroom or something. The loo, Maggie corrected her. We say loo. Suddenly Grant appeared from around the corner. Well, skip to the loo, my darling, he chippered. I think you better come with me, he whispered behind his hand to Christina. We walk around and make some snapshots, Christina asked Mr. Bryan quickly. Every tourist does, he said, heading for the nearest bench to resume his crossword puzzle. What's up, Christina? And Maggie asked as soon as Mr. Bryan was out of earshot. Grant didn't answer. Instead, he led them away down the path towards the river. Look, he finally said. See the towers of the Tower of London and the Tower Bridge? You can climb up there. There are steps inside. I see them. So? Said George. So, said Grant. Maybe you can get inside the clock tower at Big Ben. Maybe someone can really get up there and plant a bomb that they could make go off by remote control. Maggie shook her head. I don't think so. You're not allowed. Christina laughed mockingly. Well, bad people don't usually stand around obeying orders and following rules. When she saw Mr. Bryan watching them suspiciously, she began to make pictures with her camera, just pointing and aiming them at anything, not even looking through the viewfinder. But why would anyone want to blow up Big Ben anyway? George asked. Everyone loves Big Ben. Sometimes people just like to cause turmoil, Christina said. They want to attack and destroy things people love and are proud of. Like the Statue of Liberty in your country, guessed Maggie. Yes, she said. Like Big Ben in yours, or something that stands for national pride. But why do people want to do such dastardly deeds? Grant asked. Apparently the wind wants to answer. Ah! Christina knew he must have picked up that phrase from some mystery or detective books he loved to read. Just mean and mixed up, Mimi says, said Christina, shrugging her shoulders. It's a lot of wind. I apologize. We're just going to have to wait it out for a minute. Come on, we're almost done with the chapter. Hold on. Maggie plopped down on the grass and as she joined the others. She began picking wild daisies and chaining them together. Well, we're not supposed to think about Big Ben, she reminded them. And certainly not doing anything about Big Ben, added Christina. Brent was very quiet. He continued to stare at the towers. Christina could see the wheels turning in his head, just like the drawbridge wheels turning in the towers. She knew he would not give up worrying about Big Ben, and she really didn't know whether to encourage or discourage her brother regarding the matter. Then Grant did something that helped them all make a decision. He opened his hand. And that is the end of chapter 11. Again, sorry about the wind. My good idea probably maybe wasn't the best idea. But regardless, I hope you had a good time. And I'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.